G'day everybody. Sorry I haven't made a video for a while. I sort of just got over filming really, to be honest with you. The motor's in and it is running great. It's got heaps more torque. Pretty much from the last video, everything that still needed to be done, you would have done pulling the old motor off, so you didn't really need to be shown. Things like just mating the flywheel back up and all those sort of little things. Remember to get the flywheel spacer off your original motor. That confused me for about 10 minutes until I remembered that it was still on there. So everything we've done to get it back in, you did pulling the old motor out, or you would have already done so far. So nothing, there was no real curveballs. I think I forgot to get the flywheel spacer off my original motor, which confused the hell out of me trying to put the new flywheel on. But as far as putting the motor back in the car, it was all just super straightforward. Just remember, you have got a little bit of a higher deck height. If I had my time again, I would probably have left the upper manifold off and put the block in the car without the manifold on, and then done the rest of the manifold job once the motor was in the car, because I sort of made that a little bit difficult for myself with how much higher the new motor is, and I mucked around, but I got it in eventually. The only thing really that's different that I haven't covered is I've put a turbosmart fuel pressure regulator here, because the Mitsubishi 380s are a deadhead system, meaning that there's no return line on the other end of the fuel rail. So on your original rail, it would have had an input line and an output line, I suppose a fuel in and a return line. But these just, yeah, they deadhead, so it basically just goes in and stops. So with the regulators, yep, you can have a adjustable fuel pressure regulator that, like I have. I've got a turbosmart regulator here with a gauge on it, so I can dial it in. You can go and buy an Aeroflow one or do whatever you want. The other option would be to just hit up the guys at the Delica garage, and they sell an adjustable fuel regulator mount, and you can just then remote mount your old reg to run with this system. So the reason that we need to change it is because obviously the 380s had a regulator in the tank, whereas the 3 litres had a regulator on the rail, and they were an open system, whereas this deadheads. Everything else, I'm not really sure what to point out. I mean, everything else was just really easy. I made up that spacer. I'm not sure if that was done in the last video. We made up a spacer here, so that sits a little bit higher. Can you see that? So we made up a spacer that sits under this upper housing here, because otherwise that won't sit properly. And you've obviously just got to clearance a few things and muck around. So you've always got the option, obviously, of just remote mounting your old reg with the fitting that they sell at the Delica garage. I mean, I quite like the idea of an adjustable regulator for later tuning, and also if I'm diagnosing any problems, I can just look in the engine bay now at that gauge and know that I have fuel pressure. But the rest of it was super straightforward. If you got the motor out and got to the point I was at in the last video, then you would know how to do everything to get this back in. So mating the flywheel and all that stuff was really easy. There's just one more thing I'm going to show you with the exhaust that we needed to modify. And you should be able to be kicking yours in the guts. All right, so we are underneath the car looking at where the 2 exhaust manifolds meet in the center underneath the sump. You can see I've just had to put a slip joint in here. When you bolt your new ones up, because the deck height's a little bit, I suppose, wider and higher, there'll be a gap here and you won't be able to mate the 2 exhausts up. So you could go to an exhaust shop and get them to weld a bit of pipe in, which is a pretty good option, and I'll probably end up doing that. In fact, I'll probably end up getting a whole new exhaust done. You will notice that the factory exhaust, the ports on the manifold are actually a little bit smaller than what's on the 3.8. So I reckon you'd have a fair bit of efficiencies to gain in getting a bigger exhaust put on. But for now, to get it running and not exhaust leaking, I just had them stretch out the ends. So I went to the exhaust shop, they cut me that bit of pipe and then stretch those ends, flange them out about, I suppose 1 exhaust size bigger, so then these could just slip in, and then I've just used 2 hose clamps. I think the exhaust shop gave me all this for $10 or $15 or something cheap. So as an interim, until you figure out your exhaust system, I mean, that's probably even a permanent solution. You could leave that and that's good to go. It doesn't leak or anything. But you will need to modify here because it doesn't fit perfectly. one other thing. If you remember back to one of my first videos, we used a 3.5 litre crossover pipe here to join the water galleries between the two heads. And I made the comment in that video that I was going to reuse that tin gasket on here. I regret doing that more than anything I've done on this entire build, and it totally screwed me over. Do not do that. Silicon the hell out of them. Make new paper gaskets. Just do not reuse the tin gasket. So once this motor's back in the car and the motor's warm and they leak, that is such a crappy job to do. That sucked. It took me something like 4 hours to get those 4 bolts off. I had to drop the exhaust, make new gaskets, MacGyver them in there, do it up, and now it's not leaking. That just absolutely ruined my entire evening, and I regret it so much. So make sure, hopefully you're watching this video before you've done this and put the motor back in, but make sure that doesn't leak before you put the motor back in the car. Also remember that you grab the flywheel spacer off here, which I forgot to do. That's what happens when you spend too long looking at something. But do not use those bloody gaskets. Do not reuse them. If anyone wants this motor, it's in Townsville. It's probably still good. It's a 3 litre. I mean, you can have it. It's free, whatever. Alrighty. Next job's going to be paint. Just getting it ready. We had someone who just kicked the crap out of it there where the old LPG system was. Did some weight reduction. Look at the size of that tank. Got rid of that tank. Got rid of the LPG system. Don't need that with 3.8 torque. And we're getting ready to spray it. I'm going to spray the whole car in Raptor liner. It's going to look super Gucci. But there we go. The conversion's done. Taken me about 3 weeks in between football, moving house, and working full time. So mainly just weekends and after work, plodding along on it. If you're not mechanically minded and you haven't done this before, it is a much better option than just replacing it with a 3 litre and probably the same amount of labour. I reckon if I was to do one again, knowing what I'm doing and having everything set up, it would probably take me, I don't know, you could probably get it done in 2 weekends if everything went right, but that's never the case. It is a reasonably big job. I mean, pulling the 3 litre and replacing it with another 3 litre probably would have been a similar level of effort. Doing the heads on this, I would personally say if your 3 litre dies and you know it's a head gasket, just leave the heads on, pull the whole motor and whack this in. From the little test drives I've done so far, it is just so much torquier. It starts better. It just feels better. All in all, I'm really happy that I did this conversion instead of trying to fix that old motor. And I just found more and more things wrong with that old motor as I went. So I'll continue to keep you posted. Cliff is doing some diagnostics and tuning on these at the moment. He's going through a newer model with a newer ECU and mapping a whole bunch of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of numbers he ends up coming out with. But he was saying that his car's really coming to life since he has started dialing in his air fuel mixtures. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with, and hopefully I can catch up with him in Perth and get him to load his maps onto my ECU. We'll see. 3.8 swap done. Feel free to send me any questions. We'll be painting her next and then starting the camper van conversion, so stay tuned. Here it starts. I'll show you a cold start. Prove it's a cold start. I suppose I wouldn't be able to hold my hand there. If it was warm, she's, stone cold at the moment, hasn't been driven all day. My old Delica certainly didn't cold start like I hope this does, or I'm going to look like a douche. Oh yeah, I also installed an engine guard. Do that. I don't want this thing to overheat again. Boom! How good's that? The old car never did that, let me tell you. Took a few more goes. Alright, thanks everyone.